All right. How's it going, everybody? This is Mr. Gore from New Sullivan. Special shout out to Cape Chicago. I'll have a link in the description for you to check them out. We're continuing our lesson on notation this week, and I started off in the last video. I was talking about whole notes, half notes, and quarter notes. These are the last three that are most common for you to see playing music of any kind. The first one is an eighth note, second one is a 16th note, and the third one is a 32nd note, okay? So let's talk about this. Let's go down to eighth note. Eighth note gets a half of a beat, okay? Now this is going to be, this lesson right here, now this is where we get into a little bit more fractions, okay? So if you didn't know notice the pattern in the last video, I'll explain it in this video, okay? So say if we count to 4, that was the most common number I was telling you guys, right? If we count to the number 4, whole note gets 4. Half note gets 2, which is half of 4. Quarter note gets 1, which is half of 2. So the pattern is every beat that we go to that's different or subdividing and ever changing, guys, it's going to be half of whatever note precedes it. So if you learn these in order, whole note is always the biggest note. Whole note will get the biggest number, whatever number we count to. Right now we're talking about 4. Whole note will always count to 4. Half note will always, if we in 4, half note will always get 2. Quarter note will always get 1. So it's breaking in half and half and half and half. So let's get started with this section of the lesson. These are the fractional, or I don't want to say fractional, but these are the music notes that we use, and they're counted in fractions. This music notation is counted in fractions, okay? So the first one is an eighth note. This is what the one on the top is. And that little cherry stem or fancy looking 7 at the bottom, that's an eighth rest. Eighth note equals, you may have guessed it, half a beat. It equals half a beat because quarter note got 1. That's the one we left off on the last video. Quarter note gets 1. What's half of 1? Half. So, let me break this down, and I want to break it down doing a little bit of playing. If I'm counting quarter notes, right? Remember, quarter notes get 1 beat, and these get half. So if I'm counting quarter notes, 1, 2, 3, 4. There are spaces in between each note. Watch this. 1 space, 2 space, 3 space, 4 space. All that is where your eighth notes go. That's the other half of the beat. See, a quarter note is worth 2 eighth notes. So a quarter note is holding out the 2 eighth notes. It's going, and instead of saying, for right now I'm going to say half, but I'm going to teach you how to count it in a second. So a quarter note is like 1 half, 2 half, right? It's holding out for that whole number. Eighth notes is either going to be a number or the half. Only difference is in music we don't call it a half. We call it and. It just sounds better when we count. So in music it's going to be either a number or and. So if I do a measure of eighth notes, which also it gets its name because 4 times 2 is 8, right? We're trying to get to the number 4. And it takes 2 eighth notes to get 1 beat, right? So that's why it's called eighth note. It's going to be 8 of these in each measure if you're going to have a measure filled with eighth notes. So if I'm playing eighth notes, I'm counting them like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, okay? Number and, number and, number and, number and, evenly distributing them. We count to 4, so even 4 has an and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, okay? That's how we approach eighth notes in 4/4 or common time. 16th notes. 16th note, that's the next one. And you see at the bottom, we added another little swirl to that stem, to that cherry stem. That's a 16th note rest, or 16th rest rather. this gets 1/4 of a beat. We still going off the same pattern. This is why math is very important when it comes to music, because now we're breaking this down fractionally. So we said quarter note gets 1. So we're going to always base everything off a quarter note when I'm talking about these notes so you can understand it. Quarter note gets 1. Eighth note gets half, so that equals 2 eighth notes equal 1 quarter note. A 16th note gets 1/4 of a beat. So that equals either two eighth notes, a quarter note, right? But 4 16th notes equals a quarter note, 2 eighth notes, whatever. We need 4 of them. That's what 1/4 is. So for every 1 quarter note, you got 4 beats before you get to the next quarter note. That's the best way for me to explain it. For every 1 quarter note, you have 4 beats in between before you get to the next quarter note. So I'm going to show you the same way I did with eighth notes, right? If we're doing, let's go from quarter notes. We got quarter note, 1 space, 2 space, 3 space, 4 space, right? That's quarter note. We do eighth notes, and watch, I'm still going to put in the spaces so you can see where we adding in these other spaces at. 1 space, 1 space, and space, 2 space, and space, 3 space, and space, 4 space, and space. Okay? So I play all eight notes. I'm going to do that one again because I got a little tongue-tied. I made a mistake, and I don't want anybody to be confused. 1 space, and space, 2 space, and space, 3 space, and space, 4 space, and space. Okay? So the thing that we say for the spaces that you just heard me pretty much saying space for, instead of saying space, those other 2 beats that are not 1 and are going to be the letters E and the letters A, but we don't say A, we say it like if you were saying, oh, I got a new I bought you say So we got number, E, and is how we divide 16th notes. So I'm going to do it, and I'll do all of these before the end of this video, but I'm just kind of showing you how each one of them makes sense mathematically. So if I do whole, we're not on whole notes anymore. Let's do eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and actually let me go from quarter notes because I really want you to super understand this. 1 space, 2 space, 3 space, 4. Now eighth notes, 1 space, and space, 2 space, and space, 3 space, and space, 4 space, and space. Now the 16th notes I just taught you, number, E, and that's 16th notes. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and That's how we count 16th notes. So for every beat you got 4. For every number you got 4 beats that can fit into that space. And as you can probably guess, since it's 1/4 of a beat and we got 4 beats, 4 times 4 is 16. So that's why it's called a 16th note, guys. All right, let's go to the last one. This is called a 32nd note. Okay, so as you can imagine, it gets 1/8 of a beat. It'll be 32 of them in a measure. That's why it's called a 32nd note, right? The way we count this one, it fills in those spaces. We won't see this as much, so I won't go, and at the end, I will go through the whole chart from whole note down to this one, but I don't want to really explain the in-betweens for this one because it's kind of self-explanatory, and it'll make me be saying too many space, because this one is the fastest one you ever will hear. We definitely will use it in drumline, but we probably wouldn't use it in any other style of music except for classical music. When you hear Flight of the Bumblebee or any of those classical songs, they playing all 32nd notes. That's it's not the fastest because you got another note after 32nd notes, but it's almost the fastest note you can play, okay? So this note, I'm going to just teach you how to count it. We said it gets 1/8 of a beat. So Everybody count on your fingers along with me as I say these syllables. All we're using is the same syllables we already use, and that's going to be one, and it's going to be N, and it's going to be E. That's it. Okay? So, one, E, N, E, N, E, N, E. So pretty much how I teach all my students in the past, how I've taught my students in the past to count a 30-second note is to say one E and then it's three N's, right? So if we got it, we got one E, N, E, N, E, N, E, two E, N, E, N, E, N, E, three E, N, E, N, E, N, E, four E, N, E, N, E, N, E. Okay? And played on the drums, it sounds like this. One E, N, E, N, E, N, E, two E, N, E, N, E, N, E, three E, N, E, N, E, N, E, four E, N, E, N, E, N, E. I'm sorry, I hit a cymbal. I got a cymbal next to my drum. So let me try one more time. I don't want anybody to have any confusion. One more time. Count 30-second note sounds like this. One E, N, E, N, E, N, E, two E, N, E, N, E, N, E, three E, N, E, N, E, N, E, four E, N, E, N, E, N, E. Okay? That's 30-second notes. Now, if we go through the whole thing, we can go through this whole thing now. We know the whole thing, okay? So let's go through the whole thing in order. Starting with the first one is a whole note. It's counted like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Measure of half notes, which is the second one, the one that looks like a lowercase d. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Quarter note. It looks just like the lowercase d, but the circle is darkened. That's the only difference. It gets one beat. This is one of the most important ones. It's the pulse of music. 1, 2, 3, 4. You add a stem to the top of the quarter note, and now you got an eighth note. It gets half of a beat. We count it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, right? Number half. But we just say and instead of half. 16th note has two flags connected to the top, and we count that one. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and the last one is 30-second notes. It gets an eighth of a beat. It got three flags at the top, and it sounds like this: 1 E N E N E N, 2 E N E N E N, 3 E N E N E N, 4 E N E N E N. Okay. So each one of these different musical notation that we use, one of these music notes we use, is pretty much breaking down mathematically. And hopefully today in your lesson, you're able to understand the difference in these notes. We can mix these notes up. That's all music is mixing up all of these different notes and all the different rests and making a song, a beat, or whatever we're doing musically. This is the key. This is gold. This is what you need to know if you want to know anything about music, okay? So make sure we learn our notation and we practice going through it, practice it with the video, practice on a pillow. And yeah, music is math. Like I said, if you notice, this is another cool thing I want to just point out, okay? You can only get one. So I'm going to show you the other way mathematically we can look at this. Remember, I showed you it goes down by halves, right? 4 for whole note, 2 for half note, 1 for quarter note, half for eighth note, 4 for 16th, 8 for 32nd. If we go the opposite way, you can only get one whole note. 1 times 2 is 2. You can get 2 half notes. 2 times 2 is 4. So you can get 4 quarter notes. 4 times 2 is 8. So you'll always be able to get eighth notes in the measure. 8 times 2 is 16. So you can get 16 16th notes in the measure. And 16 times 2 is 32, which is why you can get 32 notes in the 30-second note measure, okay? So as we do a measure using all of these, if we do a measure using either one of these, you should be able to understand now how many that can fit in the measure And also, that this is where the cool part comes in and the challenging part comes in about reading music. When they switch them up and you're doing combinations of them, the combinations challenge you to think differently or do something that you may not initially would have done. So it's really cool to play around with reading these different notes. So I want you to practice this week. Like I said, practice on the prelude, practice all these things we've been talking about. Hopefully this video on notation was very helpful, and hopefully you don't have any questions. Hopefully I cover all bases. If I didn't cover all bases, feel free to comment below or find a way to reach out to me, and we'll definitely make sure we get you caught up to speed. All right, guys.